What's going on YouTube? It's Teej back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my official preseason NFL power rankings, and hopefully you all enjoy today's video. If you do, hit that like button, it would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want more football content like this in your life, hit that big red subscribe button and comment your thoughts on my power rankings, but also tell me where you have these teams stacked up down in the comments section. Who do I have too high? Who's too low? All that sort of information. Love to have your thoughts. I respond to every comment. So let's talk about the NFL and its power rankings down below. And right before we jump into this, I am going to try to keep this video as short as possible. If you want to hear me talking more about a specific team or maybe your favorite team, definitely go back and check out my season preview series. I talk about each and every team for at least 10 minutes. So if you want some more on any given team, go back and check out those videos. So starting our power rankings, no surprises here. The Texans at 32, Detroit at 31. I think just a few more long-term pieces for Detroit. That's why they get the edge over Houston. But both these teams are not ready to compete yet. Houston is maybe in the toughest position I've ever seen an NFL team in the sense that their one valuable asset right now can't be traded because there's 22 civil suits against them, and that's obviously a big problem. Detroit, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, T.J. Hockenson, solid player. The Okwara brothers, I think that's a good duo. Trey Flowers gives you some trade value. I think Jeff Okuda's in for a bounce back year. Like Aaron Glenn, Dan Campbell, I think he's a long-term fixture, or at least to build the culture. David Culley, I'm not entirely sure what the Texans see with him long-term. Is he going to be there for more than just this year, or is Culley just kind of a placeholder? Time will tell, but those are definitely the bottom two teams in the NFL. Then there is a pretty sizable jump forward, and you could say there's a sizable jump from the Lions from the Texans, but the Eagles, this is a team that legitimately, if I saw the future and they had 7 wins, I wouldn't be that surprised, because they have good veterans on the defensive side of the ball, like Fletcher Cox still plays at a high level. Brandon Graham's a quality player as well. Darius Slay can play well. Steven Nelson on the other side of it should enhance Slay's play. That's kind of a funny thing to say. But nonetheless, there's enough veterans on that side of the football where if Jalen Hurts races the floor just enough, this team could get sneaky good. But I don't see that happening, right? Hurts has good rushing ability. But just like I talked about with David Culley, I'm not entirely sure the Eagles are fully diving into Nick Sirianni. We'll see. I mean, this is just my speculation as of right now before we even get underway. But Hurts is probably not the long-term guy. Devonta Smith, I think, has what it could take to be a number one wide receiver, and it helps that he is a polished route runner. But given this team has a low ceiling in regards to passing the football, maybe Gardner Minshew will change that. I don't know. Things could get weird in Philly. Maybe that elevates the value of Devonta Smith. But overall, I still think the offense could be able to do enough to take advantage of the good quality veterans on the defensive side of the ball. And they also play in a division I think that's getting better. So I have them coming in at 30. You could definitely move them up and over the Bengals. I think the Bengals have some qualities that could make them pretty competitive. They also play in a tough division, so that's what partially holds them back. But there's no question on paper this offense is loaded for everything outside of the offensive line. I think the offensive line's better. It's gone from completely desolate, abysmal, however you want to describe it, to just bad, which is not to say that that is going to get the job done, but it went from terrible, something you should not throw on an NFL field, to it's just being a bad unit, which is progress nonetheless. Joe Burrow, you hope that he can shake off any sort of jitters or concerns he might have getting back out on the field. Hopefully he can stay healthy. And if he does, look, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, you know what you're going to get out of those guys. I know Jamar Chase had a bad preseason, and there's the off-the-field issues now starting to come to a rise. Hopefully all that sorts it out. Both, Chase's off-the-field situation, but also his yips, essentially, right? Like baseball players can't make a throw right now. Chase just can't catch a football. It's weird. Not something you normally see. But hopefully he can sort that out. And if he does, the wide receiver core is insane with Joe Burrow. That will put up a ton of points. They also need to keep Burrow upright, obviously. The defense is something I'm really skeptical on. Don't like the linebacking core. And you could say, sure, in a 4-3 defense especially, linebacking core is not necessarily what you need to be excellent at. But to that point, Trey Hendrickson, I think he's a good pass rusher, but he's nothing otherworldly, right? He's not going to shake the earth that he stands on. And, Sam Hubbard's a good player, but again, same thing could be said that I said about Hendrickson. And then the secondary, Jesse Bates is a stud. Give you that one. Von Bell's pretty good. Trey Wayne's coming off an injury. He had been playing better football, but is he going to get back to that? I don't know. And Chidobe Awuzie, solid enough. Mike Hilton's a good slot corner, so there's some pieces there, but overall, I think that defense is going to be pretty bad. Also, I'm unconvinced that this is the right coaching staff for this team moving forward. I think Zach Taylor will lose his job at the end of this year, which I'm not hoping anybody gets fired or anything like that. But I think someone else will be able to take this team further than Zach Taylor can right now. Team number 28 is going to be the Carolina Panthers. Ultimately, they're here because I am just not convinced that Sam Darnold is going to be the long-term option. I can appreciate them trying to, levy assets like a 2, a 4, and a 6 into a potential franchise quarterback. In theory, that sounds like a cost-effective way of getting the job done. I just don't think Darnold's end up going to be worth any of those picks, right? Especially the second. I could be wrong. Things could change. If he hits, there's a lot of talent on the field, right? The wide receiver core is great. Terrence Marshall's looked awesome. You add him into the mix with Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. That's awesome. Christian McCaffrey, a stud. We know that much. Chuba Hubbard also looked pretty good. I do worry about the offensive line, and ultimately I think that will contribute to potential bad play from Sam Darnold. And I should say, I think this will be the best year of Darnold's career. But when saying that and then quantifying it into a QB rating or PFF grade, it's going to be about what Teddy Bridgewater was last year and that sort of metric. So ultimately, I think this team's going to pretty much be back where they were a season ago, and that's where I really do kind of wish they took Justin Fields at 8, or maybe next offseason they'll be in the running for Deshaun Watson if he's not traded, or maybe they try to get sneaky and get in on a Aaron Rodgers bidding war. Time will tell, but I just don't think Darnold's going to be that guy. Additionally, on the other side of the ball, I do like a lot of their players. I'm a huge Brian Burns fan. Hassan Reddick, quality pass rusher on the other side. Derek Brown going to continue to get better heading into year 2. Same could be said about Jeremy Chin. Throw in J.C. Horn, that helps boost up that secondary and that cornerback group in specific. They do lose Troy Pride Jr., but Donta Jackson on the outside alongside J.C. Horn, I think that is a pretty solid duo. You also have A.J. Boye, so there's pieces I like, but this is as competitive as the NFL's ever been, so what they have right now just isn't going to be good enough to get them up and over and out of the mid to low 20s. After the Panthers comes the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Trevor Lawrence looked really good in that last preseason game. We'll see how it stacks up against real NFL game action. But I do worry his play is going to be capped by the tackles, in specific Cam Robinson. We'll see. Maybe he does take a step forward. It gives you a career year. But Juwan Taylor continues to look like he just isn't ready. Maybe Walker Little fills in and is a good enough replacement to either one of those players. But from what I've seen so far and what I've heard, there's not a whole lot to believe in between those two guys, and I think that hampers what Lawrence could be right off the jump. You lose Travis Etienne, so back to James Robinson leading that backfield. I think Etienne just gives you a little bit higher ceiling, obviously with the big playability, but also his pass catching upside. But now that kind of paves the way to Laviska Shenault hopefully being used in that role. I have him in one of my fantasy leagues, so I'm definitely hoping on that. I know a lot of other people are as well. But he also has that skill set. I mean, Laviska Shenault was one of my favorite receivers coming out of that 2019 draft class. I think I have him at wide receiver 5 behind the big 3, Justin Jefferson. Then I had Laviska at number 5. DJ Chark, I think, is a good wide receiver. Not great, but he is still good. Marvin Jones looked pretty solid as well. So there's things to like about the offense. And Darrell Bevell, a proven offensive coordinator who's done a pretty solid job throughout his career. On the other side, it comes down to Josh Allen, Caleb Von Chason, especially considering Shaq Griffin looked pretty bad this preseason. And, I think they're going to hold on to CJ Henderson, but if they don't, then that core becomes pretty worrisome. But this team is going to have to generate some pass rush, and that starts with Josh Allen, who I think has already played pretty good football. He could take a step forward, but I'm a big believer in a bounce-back year for Caleb Von Chason, though this coaching staff, hasn't really used him in a way that will allow him to break out, and, maybe he's just not capable of it, and maybe me expecting a breakout from Chason is going to bust. Time will tell, but if they don't get pass rush, this defense is going to be bad, and given how bad the offensive line is, I don't know if the Jags are truly going to be able to go point for point with a whole lot of other teams. Jets coming in at number 26. They're actually a pretty big mover from when I did my first power rankings up on the channel. I'm buying in what this offense is selling. Mike LaFleur, I'm here for it. I like the offense he's drawing up. Zach Wilson looks as expected. The big arm can operate outside the pocket, make things happen when the play goes and decays. The running back core room, it's good enough. Nobody there wows you, but in that offense, it's serviceable. They patched up the offensive line after I did my official power rankings the first time through. Morgan Moses, a good quality addition. I like what Elijah Vera Tucker has been right away. Mekhi Becton looks like he's even better in year 2. So I'm here for it. And then Corey Davis looking like a number 1 wide receiver, which is kind of crazy, but he got a ton of volume this preseason. Elijah Moore's not even playing yet, but him, Jamison Crowder's your slot wide receivers, all forward. Denzel Mims, a bit of a disappointment, but overall, I like what that offense is selling. Losing Carl Lawson actually kept this team out of the top 25. Otherwise, I would have moved him up and over Atlanta. But if this team can find a way, maybe add a veteran, generate some pass rush, this team could get sneaky, and especially if they get off to a hot start. Don't be surprised if they're buyers at the trade deadline. The Atlanta Falcons are at number 25. I said this 1,000 times. The offense is going to be good. They're going to put up points. Love Arthur Smith. That's a great hire. And off of play action, I think this team's going to be lethal. But that defense is just bad. And Dean Pease can draw up pressure, but there's only so much a coach can do, considering he's not the one getting sacks, making tackles, intercepting passes, those sorts of things. So he can put players in the right position, but overall, I think the talent on that side of the ball, it just isn't there outside of Grady Jarrett and Deion Jones. At least as of right now. Maybe some of those young players will take a step forward, but as it stands right now, Jarrett, Jones, and that's really about it. The New Orleans Saints are team number 24, and look, Jameis Winston, Marquez Callaway looked fantastic in that preseason game just a couple weeks ago, but again, the Jags defense looks like it's going to be worse than the money they put into it this offseason. So I'm not totally convinced, but also Jameis Winston is one of those guys where on a scale of 1 to 10, he feels like he either gives you plays that are all ones or plays that are all tens. There's not a whole lot of in between. And he looked great in that game. And, 23 dropbacks, liked what I saw. But once we get into week 1, I can see more than 23, dropbacks for Winston. Then I'll have a better idea if this is going to work or not with Sean Payton and that offense. Because that game might have only shown us, the 10 caliber plays, right? On a scale of 1 to 10. And the first 23 dropbacks he has week 1 against Green Bay might all be ones. So I still need some more time just given Winston's track record. But man, if he plays like he did in that preseason game, not even as good. If he just plays anywhere near that neighborhood consistently, this team is scary because they have the star power elsewhere. So I'm not completely sold on Winston Callaway, but if those two players do provide, and Michael Thomas, depending on when he gets back, then that offense might be maybe even better than it was last year because Kamara still in the mix, obviously. The offensive line's healthy, big plus. And like I said, this defense has star power and recognizable names. Marcus Davenport has continued to get better. He probably takes a leap forward this year. Peyton Turner's your first-round pick. Everybody knows who Cameron Jordan is and the level of play he brings to the table. Demario Davis does it at a high level. Marshawn Lattimore, a guy who, when he's on the field, is as talented as it gets. Still haven't seen the best of his play, I think, but this might be the year. Marcus Williams, Johnson Gardner-Johnson, like those guys as well. So the Saints, a lot of star power. Just need to see it more from Winston and Callaway before I totally buy into it. And ultimately, the Giants are above them because I like the Giants roster, the sum of their parts a little bit more. Saints have the star power. Giants, I think, have just a better whole. But you flip those two either way. And the Giants are obviously looking for better play out of Daniel Jones, but that offensive line is going to have to be improved. And I'm really worried about the interior offensive line and how that might affect Saquon Barkley as well. So I have my reservations for what this offense might look like. But even if they can get through this year and just see, okay, Jones looked good, the pass catchers are great, obviously. And I don't even think it's necessarily the total offensive line. I think the tackles are going to be better and they're going to be serviceable. If they can just recognize, hey, that interior offensive line was bad and it limited what Saquon to do and potentially what Daniel Jones could get done. Then they patch that up in free agency in the draft. Maybe this team is scary moving forward. As it stands right now, I'm a little too worried about the offensive line and the erratic nature that comes with Daniel Jones, but I do like that defense. And something that might hurt this team long term is Patrick Holmes is a fantastic defensive coordinator, and he probably ends up being a head coach here in the next 2 to 3 years minimum. So once he takes that head coaching job, how do you fill that vacancy? But for the here and now, that defense looks really, really good. Raiders are team number 22. They could be in the hunt for the wild card, right? Like if everything breaks in their favor, if Henry Ruggs can emerge as a number 1 target in that offense, that goes a long way. And really, he doesn't even have to be a number 1 target because Darren Waller's that leading target guy for the Raiders. If Ruggs can be a nice complement, be that number 2 option, that helps them out a ton. The offensive line looks pretty good. Alex Leatherwood, actually, really solid so far in the preseason at right tackle. And he will help out the running game, which inherently will help out the rest of that offense. John Gruden is an efficient offensive coordinator, essentially, as a play caller for this team. He does it really well there. The defense just can't suck. If this team doesn't have a horrid defense, they'll be pretty solid. And I think they've put in enough money into that side of the ball where they'll have some players step up, and they won't be good. They probably won't be average, but they won't be among the worst defenses in football. Like, I love the Yannick Ngakoue signing, Casey Hayward for next to nothing. They both fit, obviously, with the Gus Bradley defense. So, like some things there for the Raiders. They also just got Denzel Perriman, buy low, potentially has some upside and could bring a big bolster to a linebacking core that's pretty poor in Vegas. So I like this team and where they're potentially at, but they're going to need some things to break their way to be serious contenders. The Bears come in at 21. I like a lot of this roster, and I love Justin Fields. And, midway through the season, I definitely think we're seeing him under center. But I worry about those tackles, and I worry about the corners. And because of that, I cannot put this team any higher than this. Honestly, 21 might be a little too high because Jason Peters is just not the guy he once was, assuming he is going to be the starting left tackle week 1 against the Rams. And Jermaine Ifedi, I think, is a better guard. He did play a little bit better at the end of last year at right tackle, but I still don't think he is a long-term great option at that position. And Jalen Johnson was one of the best corners in football, rookie-wise, last year, but then he got hurt after week 8. Is he going to be that good again? And can he stay on the field for the full 17? Kendall Vildor, is he your number 2 corner? Desmond Trufant, not in love with either of those options. So I think because they have such large question marks at some of the biggest important positions on the field, I can't put this team much higher than where they are right now, though I do like a ton of the talent on the roster. Broncos coming in at number 20. This is a team I like with every position group they have except for quarterback. The offensive line is good enough. Awesome pass catchers. The running back room, solid. Mike Boone's a fantastic number 3 running back. Javonte Williams, in my eyes, becomes the starter, and then you have Melvin Gordon in there as well. And the defense, really, really good. Shelby Harris, Von Miller, Bradley Chubb. Miller and Chubb playing for the first time since 2018. How crazy is that? A full season, that is. They played 4 games together in 2019. But all that to say, I think the front seven's going to be really good. AJ Johnson, Josie Jewell, good enough inside linebackers, and they have a deep secondary. Teddy Bridgewater's just going to have to be better than he has been in his career, which the sum of the parts might elevate his play to where they can get into the playoffs. I'm not saying it's impossible. Playing in the AFC West doesn't help. And on that note, this team can't go blow for blow with Kansas City. And if they get in a slugfest with the Chargers, I don't see them keeping up with LA there. The Raiders even have a more high-octane offense, and I think this team could potentially keep up with just because Teddy Bridgewater isn't that guy. Now, if this game script becomes let's pound the rock with Williams and Gordon and Mike Boone, and let's set up play action, take some shots with Sutton and Judy, and let's work interesting ways to have Hamler be a part of the mix, use Noah Fant, that is different. If this becomes a great defense, the offense is led by the rushing attack, which is a little outdated, but maybe it can still work. And Teddy Bridgewater can be someone who just limits turnovers, makes the throws he needs to. They will need him to make a few big throws this year, and maybe he can take that step forward. But right now, I'm unconvinced. So I'm kind of surprised Drew Lock didn't win the job, given he did look good this preseason. And Teddy Bridgewater definitely raises the floor, but he also lowers your ceiling. Colts are at 19. Colts fans hate me and my channel because I'm definitely low on them. I know Wentz is going to be playing week 1. Quentin Nelson probably will be too. But I don't like him better than the Seahawks, who we'll talk about here pretty soon. I just think this team, again, kind of like what we talked about with the Bears, question marks at some of the most important positions until Eric Fisher's back. That left tackle position is a big worry. I like Michael Pittman, but I think he's a solid number 2 wide receiver. You're losing T.Y. Hilton now. Paris Campbell, he's been injury prone. I just don't know if they're going to have enough guys that can purely get open and maximize what Carson Wentz's skill set can be. And on the defensive side, I know the defense was really, really good last year. Kwity Paye looked fantastic in the preseason, so that eases some of my worries with the pass rush because Buckner and Paye, really nice duo there, getting the job done, getting into opposing quarterbacks. They would like to have one more guy step up. But then the secondary, is Xavier Rhodes going to be that good again? And really, he was great for the first 4 to 5 weeks last year and then had some moments sprinkled in there. What is he going to be like this year? Rocky Sin, does he finally take that step forward? I loved him coming out of Presbyterian. Love the safeties for this team. But I just have a few reservations. But if there's a team I'm going to be wrong on, it's going to have to be the Colts. And their fan base will just rejoice, I'm sure. Pittsburgh Steelers coming in at 18. The Matt Canada offense looks like, as a fan of this team, what I wanted it to be. A lot of motion, way more play action, and it's a way to try to maximize the value of Najee Harris, but also hide the weakness that is that offensive line. Get a ton out of those awesome playmakers on the outside, Juju, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and then try to get another really good year out of Big Ben. Try to squeeze out any sort of production he has left in him. He's nearly 40 years old, but I think he can put together another solid season under his belt, and the defense is going to be good. Losing Stephon Tuitt on IR, so he's out for the first 3 games, not ideal, but TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Tyson Alualu, really good nose tackle. Devin Bush is healthy. Joe Schobert, they got him for pennies on the dollar. Even got some of the cap hit paid there. Do worry about the secondary, but Minka Fitzpatrick's a playmaker. Hayden is still playing at a good enough level. This team has a track record of figuring out where their weaknesses are and patching those holes. So I'll go with Mike Tomlin and how well he coaches this team. So they come in at number 18. The Cardinals are my 17th team. I think this is going to be the biggest disappointment out of this upcoming year. And they're at 17 because of the talent on the roster right now. But I just think Cliff Kingsbury is going to ultimately disappoint. He'll lose his job at the end of the year, just like we talked about with Zach Taylor. I don't wish this on any of these guys, but that's just how I see it right now. And then we'll look at this Cardinals team with 6 or 7 wins and say, man, J.J. Watt on that defense, Chandler Jones too, like they couldn't get it done. And I think a big part of that is, Malcolm Butler looks like he's retiring. That secondary outside of Budda Baker is bad. Like Marco Wilson looked pretty good in the preseason, but counting on not just one rookie, but potentially 2, Tate Gowan might be the other starting outside corner opposite of Wilson now. That is just a recipe for disaster. And as much as I liked Gowan coming out of UCF, and Wilson has looked good, I just think that's putting yourself in a tough spot. And this offense will put up points. We'll see if Cliff Kingsbury can innovate the offense, get the most out of Rondale Moore and DeAndre Hopkins and everybody on that side of the ball. But I'm unconvinced based off of what I've seen so far. Team number 16 is the Seattle Seahawks. Like the addition of Sidney Jones, they did trade Akel Witherspoon though. Figuring out what that secondary is going to look like, especially if they're going to use Jamal Adams. This is, box safety / pass rusher. You're taking him away from that deep safety spot where he can help out a guy like Quandre Diggs, who's a good player in his own right. That is really interesting, and it'll take some time for me to really get my opinion formed on that secondary. Because on paper, the corners are still pretty weak, as much as Sidney Jones can give you a bolster in that group. Bobby Wagner still a fantastic linebacker. Questioning how much pass rush this team can generate, but maybe Darrell Taylor gives you a boost there. Carlos Dunlap for a full season. He looked pretty good towards the end of the year once he joined the Seahawks. Maybe he can keep that play going on to this year. And Jamal Adams, maybe he's got another 9.5 sacks in him. He's a fantastic player, and they're using him in a different way. So I can't be the one to judge that opinion because he's doing something we haven't really seen a safety ever do. And then the offense is going to put up points. I love Shane Waldron. I think that's a great hire. Add some horizontal movement. Get the most out of Dwayne Eskridge, who they took in the 3rd round, maximizing your value there. But also bringing in Gerald Everett, coming with Waldron from the Rams, gives Russell Wilson an athletic tight end we just really haven't seen him have. Another year of development for Lockett and Metcalf. This offense is going to pour on the points. I'm just going to need some time to evaluate that defense. And if the defense, it's similar to what we talked about earlier with the Raiders, right? They don't need to be good. They just can't be terrible. And if they do that, this is obviously a pretty good football team. On to the Miami Dolphins. This might be the most difficult team to place on there because they were so healthy last year and they were fantastic in the turnover margin department. And I don't think that necessarily can be consistent and carry over into this year, just given how much those two areas tend to fluctuate. But Tua's looked a lot better. And that offense built for Tua has looked pretty solid. Obviously, we like the pass catchers with Fuller missing a game, but when he's in the lineup, him, Waddle, Devonta Parker, Mike Gesicki, I'm here for it. The running game looks not great. Myles Gaskins is a pretty decent fantasy option because he can catch the football and he's going to have some large volume from week to week. But I do worry about that running game and putting too much pressure on the shoulders of Tua, and the offensive line's not great. So while there's pieces of the offense I like, and I do like that defense pretty much overall, and I love Brian Flores, I just don't think this team is ready to compete just yet. And if they got Deshaun Watson, he has a track record of being good despite a bad offensive line, so that would definitely change a little bit. But I don't think that trade's going to happen while everything is going on behind the scenes with Deshaun Watson. So it's going to be another offseason before we potentially see that come to fruition. But either way, even if Watson was there, I'd worry about the offensive line ahead of him and the running game playing with him. Watson's good enough to elevate past those weaknesses. Tua, I don't think he's there yet, and he might not ever be as good as Watson has been so far in his career. So the Dolphins coming at 15. Chargers at number 14. They're a sneaky good team because I think it's going to take some time for the defense under Brandon Staley to find and figure itself out. But mid to late year, this team could get hot. And they could get sneaky if they make it into the playoffs, because if the defense starts clicking on all cylinders, I like the talent on that side of the ball. Joey Bosa, maybe they can add another pass rusher in and around the trade deadline to complement him. I'm liking that, or maybe even adding another defensive lineman to go with Michael Pierce. Jerry Tillery so far has been less than what they had expected. Maybe he takes a step forward, so you don't need to make a trade. Either one of those two components would make that defense that much better. I think Kenneth Murray's in for a big year too. Asante Samuel Jr. gives you good play. I think right away to go with Michael Davis, and Chris Harris Jr. is still one of the best nickel corners in football. If Derwin James is healthy, that's the chess piece that changes the board so much. And if James is out there, that defense will be really, really good. And this offense is going to put up points. It kind of comes down to offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi and the offense he draws up. But Herbert, a stud in the making. Austin Eckler, maybe the best pass-catching running back the game has to offer. Keenan Allen is one of the best route runners in the NFL. Mike Williams gives you some upside. Still a young guy. Jump ball receiver minimum. But even if it's not him, Jalen Guyton had some good games at the end of last year. Josh Palmer's looked good this preseason. And wide receiver tends to be a position where rookies can make an impact right away. Jared Cook's, whatever. The tight end's definitely a downgrade from Hunter Henry. But all that to say, really like what the defense can gel into. And I think the offense has the potential to be a team that goes point for point with Kansas City, which may be a little crazy to say, but they could, on the right day, go drive for drive with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City. And I like the playmakers on the defensive side. So 14 might be too low here in a few weeks' time. Cowboys come in at 13. This team's defense just got to not suck. Micah Parsons has looked awesome. He looks like a stud in the making, both as off-ball linebacker, but also as a potential pass rusher. Hopefully Dan Quinn can get creative. He's not been one to normally blitz his linebackers a ton, but given this situation, a player like Parsons, hopefully he can change his ways. Randy Gregory can hopefully take a step forward and become a nice complement opposite DeMarcus Lawrence. If that happens, Lawrence can then get back to where he was 2 years ago. Needs some better plays out of the interior defensive line as well. You'd like to see Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch figure it out, but honestly, if they're going nickel, it looks like Parsons and Keanu Neal are their guys, and they've been the most impressive to me so far. And then the secondary, there's some young talent that we like. Donovan Wilson, Trevon Diggs. I'm a big Diggs fan, but I think he's a nice number 2 corner. Gives you some high upside playmaking ability. I think there's still a shutdown corner away from being an above average type of defense if things clicked. Right now, I think this team would be capped at if everything went their way. They would be, in that 16 to 18 mark for defense, based off yards and points allowed and turnover margin and things of that nature. But that's good enough to get the job done when you have an offense like this team. They have the best wide receiver trio in football. I would say them or Tampa Bay, right? Zeke Elliott, Tony Pollard, like the backfield. The offensive line needs to stay healthy, but if it is, it's still a very good unit, top 5 to top 8 in the NFL. Dak Prescott, a serious MVP candidate this year. All that to say, this is a really good team that needs some help, but they're definitely there as serious contenders this year. Patriots coming in at number 12. I like the move to have Mac Jones be the starter. It's one of those things where you spent a first-round pick on him, and he was the most pro-ready of any of the quarterbacks. So it doesn't make sense for him to sit, right? Like Trey Lance might need some time, and Justin Fields is not necessarily in a great situation. So you don't want to throw him out there and have him develop bad habits. But Lawrence, he's a starter day one. Zach Wilson has looked like a starter day one. And Mac Jones has as well. And the situation isn't terrible. Sure, he could have some better wide receivers. Maybe there's a trade they can make ahead of the deadline to improve that core. But even if it's Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, it's not terrible. It's just not great. The tight ends, though, that's a really, really solid duo to say the least. Love Damian Harris, especially no Cam Newton. I drafted Harris in every fantasy league, all 4 of my drafts. And now I'm feeling fantastic. I'm feeling great, especially considering that offensive line is stellar and it has some depth to it. So loving that offense. I think Mac Jones is in a good spot there. Then on the defensive side, they are the definition of not a whole lot of stars left. Like you still have Gilmore and McCourty, who are, I think Gilmore's going to be back closer, not quite as good as he was when he was Defensive Player of the Year, but closer to that than he was last year. And McCourty's going to continue to be a good player overall. But this is not a defense that, has an Aaron Donald, a Jalen Ramsey, a Derwin James, or anything like that on it. But they play fundamentally on that side of the ball. Bill Belichick's a mastermind, and he's given me no reason to not trust him coaching the defensive side of the ball. So I have no reason to think they won't be good in an efficient defense. What they'll probably end up doing is what they've always done, at least over the last decade, it feels like. They'll give up a fair amount of yards, but then they'll force teams to settle for 3, and they'll be one of the best defenses in football in points per game where it really matters. And then the offense is going to be really efficient, and they're going to be a solid football team and right there in the playoff mix. I've got the Washington football team coming in at number 11. For my money, best defense, best pass rush, both in the NFL. I like what they've done with the secondary, bringing in Bobby McCain, William Jackson III, adding some depth. Also drafted Benjamin St-Juste, who I've heard a lot of good things coming out of the Washington training camp. Jamin Davis, I think, is in for a big year. Pretty solid pick for me. Defensive player of the year wise, the odds aren't necessarily great, but better than that of Micah Parsons, right? So like Davis's potential value there. And on the offensive side, the offensive line's good. Pass catchers are awesome. Love Antonio Gibson as a running back. Been trying to get him in fantasy. It just comes down to Ryan Fitzpatrick. And I think this is probably the best situation he's found himself in. And you could argue over the last 3 years, he's played the best football of his career. Now, granted, that's come in, spot starts, if we want to use a baseball term there. But he's been in favorable spots, or he's been called on relief where he can just play free and handle the reins of the offense because Tua put the Dolphins in a hole, or whatever the case may be. I think this is a situation that will raise his floor a little bit while still keeping that upside. There will definitely still be some ugly games. He'll have probably at least 2 games this year where he throws 3 picks, right? Like, I think that's just part of the Fitzpatrick train. But this is one where it just takes him getting hot 4 games at the very end of the year. If this team wins the division and then Fitzpatrick gives you the high end of his variance the last 4 games of the year in the playoffs, just like another quarterback we're going to talk about a little bit later on, this team has a shot. This is a part of the list where I think teams start getting serious. Like Seattle has a shot. I think the Chargers, if things break right, the Cowboys, if things go their way, have a chance. The Patriots are always a team that you have to have in the mix. Washington, right there with them. Love the defense. If Fitzpatrick can be the best of himself, don't count out Washington. Minnesota, they probably actually have lower odds than Washington in my odds to come with the Super Bowl, and that's largely because they play Aaron Rodgers twice a year, and they're not going to win their division like Washington will, so they're not going to have a home playoff game, at least one of them. But that said, Minnesota's offense looks like it's going to be really good. Right now, Christian Darrisaw, Wyatt Davis, still question marks across the offensive line, but they're going to be able to run the football. They're going to be able to run play action off of it. Justin Jefferson's a big play waiting to happen. Adam Thielen, as good a route runner as there is in the NFL, and he's also fantastic in the red zone, and that's going to be huge this year considering they lose Kyle Rudolph, where that's really the only value Rudolph still has as an NFL pass catcher. So I'm not too worried about the offense. I'd like to see the offensive line get better, but that could take some time, and maybe by the midway point this year, we're looking at that as not that big of an issue. On the defensive side, I've had my worries from this preseason. There has been a lot of talk about Patrick Peterson, and I was one to think that the change in scenery and a new defense will help him out. But there have definitely been moments where he's looked a little washed. They signed and then immediately cut Everson Griffin, who I was thinking was going to be a starter for this team because, he's coming back. They needed somebody opposite of Danielle Hunter, who hopefully is at 100% health-wise and can return to what he was 2 years ago as one of the best defensive ends in football. But it's not going to be Griffin because he got cut, like I said. So maybe it's one of them. Maybe it's one of the rookies. They've liked Patrick Jones out of Pittsburgh, so maybe he sees the field pretty early on. I'm not crazy about relying on a mid-round rookie in that role, but the linebackers, if Anthony Barr and Eric Kendrick stay healthy, that's a solid unit. Harrison Smith is getting old, and I know he's not necessarily worth the extension he just got, but he's still one of the better safeties in the league right now. And even if it's not Patrick Peterson, Brashad Breeland, I think, is a starting caliber corner. Cameron Dancer was a really welcome addition last draft. And then you have Mackenzie Alexander coming back. Overall, I think they'll be able to piece up that cornerback position, even if Patrick Peterson doesn't work. And Xavier Woods is a good enough free safety. So I think this defense takes a big step forward in large part due to Michael Pierce being back after opting out and then signing Dalvin Tomlinson. They're going to stop the run at a high level with those two, plus Kendricks and Barr. And Mike Zimmer knows how to coach a defense, and he knows how to work with cornerbacks and secondaries overall. So they're going to take away the run, force you to pass it. They'll come away with some big plays, and that offense is obviously going to put up points. So I think this team is worthy of being in the top 10. And team number 9 is the Baltimore Ravens. Losing J.K. Dobbins definitely doesn't help this team's Super Bowl cause, but it's a team that knows how to draw up run plays, and the offense is beneficial to just about every running back, right? They moved on from Mark Ingram after he averaged 4.2, 4.3 yards per carry. That's what we're talking about with this team. And Gus Edwards, I think, will be good enough to get the job done. Maybe they want to add someone else, take over what Edwards was for this team as that second running back. They'll use a lot of different backs, but maybe they don't need to. Maybe they have someone else on the roster they really, really like. Lamar Jackson, obviously electric with his legs. He's better throwing the ball over the middle of the field, fitting into those tight windows than throwing on the outside. So losing Rashad Bateman, big injury early on. Hopefully he can come back and get integrated into the offense and be able to make an impact for this team. It's interesting to see how they use Sammy Watkins and how he fits into that. We'll have to see some live regular season games before we can fully make a strong judgment on that. But what we know for sure is Mark Andrews is going to get the job done, assuming he can hold on to the football, limits the drops. They'll run the ball really efficiently. I like the offensive line. Kevin Zeitler fills a big hole after Marshall Yonder retired. And then the defense is going to be solid. And I love them bringing in someone like Justin Houston, adding into that group of Tyus Bowser, Pernell McPhee, Odafe Oweh. Now, not only do they have some talent and some future potential with someone like Oweh and Bowser, they have Bowser signed long-term and just spent a first-round pick on Oweh. They also have some depth pieces. Pernell McPhee is definitely the odd man out. He's definitely the weakest of those four, but having Houston, someone who can help you right now, but also can coach up someone like Oweh, gives you a lot of benefit long-term. I think Patrick Queen gets better this year. Him and Malik Harrison, solid young inside linebacker duo. And the safeties do exactly what they're asked of in this Wink Martindale weird defense that they have. And then they have the best cornerback duo in the NFL for my money with Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters. Those guys know how to create turnovers with the best of them. So with an efficient but also high-scoring offense in its own right, with a playmaking, opportunistic defense that knows how to scheme up pressure coming from Wink Martindale, this is still one of the best teams the AFC has to offer, but it gets scary if they add consistent passing ability to the fold. And if they do that, they'll be way higher than team number 9. We're on to the final group of teams, number 8, the Tennessee Titans. This offense is made up of dudes who are just better than everybody, right? Julio, A.J. Brown, love that duo. Derrick Henry, still one of the most productive running backs. Hopefully he can avoid injury this year. The offensive line is great at creating holes for Henry, and they figure to be a little bit better in pass protection this year for Ryan Tannehill, which in turn helps the likes of Julio Jones and A.J. Brown. Anthony Firkser is their tight end / slot receiver, essentially, so I think he's in for a pretty solid season. Definitely a downgrade compared to Jonnu Smith, but when you have Julio, you have Brown, you're not asking for a whole lot of other targets to go around anyway, so Firkser, I think, will get the job done, and that's all, of course, after they establish the run and just wear down defenses with Derrick Henry. All that's been said by 1,000 different people, 1,000 different occasions. The defense, I think, will be better this year. Adding Bud Dupree, but then also hopefully Mike Vrabel, and that defense in general just allows Dupree and Harold Landry to go after the quarterback. Stop dropping back in coverage so much. Let them go after it. Let them do what their skill set is best aligned for. Sure, in the 3-4, you need outside linebackers to play some zone, play near the flats, do some things in space. But you gotta try to find ways where you're most of the time having them rush the QB. And if you do that, I think Landry gets back to where he was as a rookie, and then maybe even a step further. And Bud Dupree can give you some of the production he had over the last year and a half, you want to call it that, with Pittsburgh. The secondary is looking better. Christian Fulton has looked pretty good. Amani Hooker looking really good in that strong safety spot with Kevin Byers here. Deep playmaking free safety, like that tandem. Also Elijah Molden looking like he could be a big fixture in that nickel role. So now it comes down to Fulton, Jack Rabbit Jenkins, and Caleb Farley. Those three as your boundary corner options. You know, someone's going to battle injury eventually, but having those three makes me feel pretty solid. This secondary won't be terrible, which if it's okay, and then Landry, Dupree can do their thing, and if they're just free rush to the passer. Also, Jeffrey Simmons, he's a force to be reckoned with. I think there's a lot to like about that defense. It's not necessarily going to be the best in the league, but given where the offense is at, it doesn't have to be. Number 7, the San Francisco 49ers. The defense isn't as good as it was in 2019. Because you don't have Richard Sherman, and there's been some regression for some of the older players. Nick Bosa is still there, but he's coming off a torn ACL, so no guarantee that he'll be the same type of player. But Fred Warner's better now than he was then, so you also have some positive regression for that side of the ball. It comes down to Kyle Shanahan and what this offense looks like with Jimmy G versus Trey Lance, or maybe both. It looks like they're going to be using them both, or at least right away. But I think there's a point this year where it's Trey Lance and pretty much Trey Lance exclusively. And when it is, can he make the throws? Can he be consistent? We saw especially in his first preseason game, he has the 80-yard bomb, and you're like, yes, there you go, there's the upside. But then after that, it was a little wishy-washy. And even out throughout the rest of the preseason, he had those long lulls where he was fine, he was okay, but nothing spectacular. Can we get consistently good play from Trey Lance? But honestly, I think this offense is in a spot where if Lance can just be okay, do his role, be an efficient runner, get the ball into the hands of some playmakers like Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, then he takes advantage of his moments. There's 2 or 3 big plays he can make in a game. That could be enough on top of a really good defense to make this team obviously one of the best in the NFC, where I have them at number 7. I have them as the 4th best team in the NFC, and them and the Rams pretty much tied. If I could have tied for 6th, it'd be them and the Rams. They just do it in 2 different ways. Go ahead and talking about the Rams. It's the explosive offense and then freak playmakers on the defensive side. I think Matt Stafford is in a position where every year he gives you a stretch of games where he has a legit showing to be a elite, the top 10 worthy quarterback. And this is kind of what I alluded to with Ryan Fitzpatrick. If you can just get good Stafford to get you into the playoffs, but then you see those games all stack up in the playoffs, this team can win the Super Bowl. But it takes something like that happening, given Stafford isn't, right now a top 5, top 8, top 10 quarterback given. Maybe that'll change because the McVay offense will have Stafford hit a gear we haven't seen him at, and he has an abundance of weapons. He's had good players, but never this many all at once. Getting Sony Michel, I think, helps fill the void for what you lose with Cam Akers. So now you have Michel, Darrell Henderson Jr., really solid backfield duo there. Still have Tyler Higbee. Figure to have him be a really good red zone option for this team. Chris Brought runners with Kupp and Woods. Big playability with Tutu Atwell and Deshaun Jackson. And also, I'm still a big believer in Van Jefferson. So keep your eyes on him as well. And on the defensive side, Aaron Donald's the best player in football, not named Patrick Mahomes. And if you're taking away position like levity, there's a legit argument that Donald's better anyways. And then Jalen Ramsey, just because he's a cornerback, he gets overshadowed by guys like Donald and TJ Watt and maybe still Khalil Mack, Myles Garrett, because they're pass rushers, and that's such an important thing. But there's a big emphasis on cornerback play. So maybe there's a legit argument that Jalen Ramsey should be a top 3 defensive player in some people's minds. I'm not making that case, but maybe it should be for someone else. Ramsey, though, number 1 corner in the league, in my eyes, he just does whatever you need him. He can take away a side of the field. He can take away a wide receiver in general. He's a freak, and that's kind of what we expect him to be coming out of Florida State. The rest of the defense, we'll see. Leonard Floyd's a good pass rusher, definitely overpaid to have him come back. They lose Michael Brockers. How do you fill that void? Inside linebacker position, still not very good, so they might get run on a little bit. Losing John Johnson III, Taylor Rapp, now there's kind of a question mark at that safety spot, but also the nickel corner role. I am a big believer in Taylor Rapp, and I think Jordan Fuller has some positive skill sets, can be a quality starter as a deep, roaming, free safety. And then Rapp, I love he's a fun player to watch because he'll lay the boom. He's naturally such a great athlete that he'll cover a ton of ground. So I'm a big believer in Taylor Rapp, but I'm interested in that slot role and then overall how Fuller plays throughout the entire season. But with playmakers like Donald and Ramsey, the defense inherently is going to be pretty solid. Raheem Morris is also a good defensive coordinator. It just comes down to Stafford and McVay living up to the hype and putting up a ton of points. Buffalo Bills come in at number 5. They want to sling it, and that's the strength of this team. Josh Allen looks like he's back where he was last year. Stephon Diggs has emerged as one of the best wide receivers in football. They could go back out there and add John Brown if they really want to. He's a free agent as it stands right now when I'm recording this. But I think Emmanuel Sanders gives you something that Brown didn't give you, and that's someone who can also work in that 10 to 19 range, just like Stephon Diggs. Gabriel Davis, going into another year, getting better. Think he can be that deep threat. Him and Sanders both can combine to give you the production that John Brown had, giving this team deep down the field. And maybe also on top of that, you get Dawson Knox to play better football than he has so far. It just comes down to the defense, finding some answers at the other starting quarterback position opposite to Tre'Davious White. I think Levi Wallace has given this team good play, but they seem unconvinced, and that has to account for something. And then for the pass rush, can they convert more of those hurries and pressures into sacks? If they do, that ends drives, and overall it brings down opponents' yards per game, but also points per game. And if this team's defense is average, they're a Super Bowl contender. If this team's defense is top end when it comes to sacks and, it's in that 15 to 10 range for defense, maybe even higher, then this team has a serious potential shot at knocking down the Chiefs and going to the Super Bowl. Packers coming in at number 4. Aaron Rodgers is back. Devontae Adams, the last dance. All that kind of feels like it's going to boost this team forward and they're going this Cinderella run. But I am a little worried maybe that drama carries over a little bit. But between those two extremes where the drama derails the season or the rhetoric and the last dance propels this team forward, I'm probably more in the latter compared to the former. I love Aaron Jones. Love his game. He's so well-rounded. I think the offensive line is not quite as good, but once they get David Bakhtiari back, it's not a huge step backwards. Ultimately, I think Elton Jenkins looks really good filling in for Bakhtiari, and they'll be forced to slide him over to play right tackle. That allows Billy Turner to move in to play guard where he has been for most of his career, and I think that's the best move for this offensive line moving forward. But that's just how I see it, of course. And on the defensive side, really like the addition of Devondre Campbell, adding a little bit of talent and raising the floor for that linebacking core. They're going to need Kenny Clark to stay healthy, but he's a guy who can play D-tackle, rush the passer, be a good run-stopping nose as well. Rashawn Gary's a big X factor for this team. Him or Preston Smith. Can they give you consistent production opposite of Zadarius Smith, who has emerged as one of the best edges in the NFL? If that happens, this front 7 overall looks really, really good. Jai Alexander, the second best corner in football in my eyes. Love Adrian Amos, Darnell Savage. They complement each other well. Amos has been so underrated his entire career. Savage is on the rise. Love those two players. If Kevin King can just not be terrible, right? Like they just need him or Eric Stokes or whoever it ends up being to be average to above average. And then that secondary looks fantastic to go along with some big playability in the front 7 and a ton of pass rush potential between both Smiths, and Rashawn Gary plus Kenny Clark. That defense then puts itself in a position to be among the best, top half the league for sure, to go along with an offense that's going to pour on points. So all that to say, for sure, a Super Bowl contender. Cleveland Browns are my number 3 team. Gave them the edge over Buffalo for the second best team in the AFC because they can win in more ways than one. For Buffalo, they have to pass the ball efficiently and they have to score a bunch of passing touchdowns. The Browns, given the weather, they can pass the ball pretty well. I think OBJ has the best year he's had in Cleveland this upcoming season. You hope that relationship between him and Baker Mayfield is salvageable, just in the sense that the production hasn't backed up what should be there, given the names on paper. But even if they can't pass the ball and they can't get it done through the air, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, they can carry the workload behind that offensive line. For sure, you can win a game that way. And even if their offense finds its match with an opposing defense, their defense is good enough to keep it at a low-scoring game, and they have enough playmakers to ultimately make the difference, right? I love Denzel Ward. You bring in Greg Newsome with your first-round pick. Him and Greedy Williams compete for that other outside corner position. You sign Troy Hill. I'm all about it as a starting slot corner. John Johnson III, Ronnie Harrison Sr., Grant Delpit coming back from the ACL injury. Love the safety tandem. You draft Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who's all over the field in preseason. Him, Taki, Anthony Walker, who signed from the Colts. I'm liking the linebacking core a ton now. And then the pass rush anchored by one of maybe the future best edge rusher in football with Myles Garrett. Jadeveon Clowney always gets a lot of hurries, not a whole lot of sacks, but gets a lot of hurries and pressures. And I think he'll be productive as that number 2 edge player basically for this team. All that to say, I like this defense as a whole. And this team just can find a lot of different ways to win games. They're also well coached under Kevin Stefanski. His offensive scheme is exactly right for this team. So they are for sure one of the best teams in the NFL. So that's why I have to put them in at number 3. And now on to the top 2. No surprise here. Kansas City's 2, Tampa Bay number 1. It looks like we might be destined for a rematch of last year's Super Bowl, which if the Chiefs have a healthy offensive line, I'd be here to see it again. But they both have so many stars. Mahomes to Brady, Tyreek Hill to Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski. I'm bouncing back and forth between the two teams, but that's because you've heard it all offseason. These two teams continue to be the crowning achievements of team building, right? The Bucs have this perfectly assembled roster around Tom Brady. They have everybody coming back after winning the Super Bowl. The entire coaching staff's together, but they're also all vaccinated. Like that just says something that they're all buying into the goal and what they're trying to achieve. That is outstanding. The Chiefs on their side, a little bit more star power, but they also have some holes that then present itself because those stars take up so much of the cap. But that said, to me, pretty clear best two teams in football. Chiefs at 2, Bucs at 1. But tell me what you think about my NFL preseason power rankings in. Tell me how you think these teams stack up down in the comment section. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Who do you think the best team in each division or maybe just overall in the NFL is? Love to have your thoughts. I respond to every comment. So let's talk about my power rankings and yours down below. Hope you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want more sports content like this, please consider subscribing. That's going to do it for my preseason NFL power rankings. You'll be seeing this sort of content week in and week out once we're into the NFL season. But until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.